fourth edition of Bangladesh Economic Summit organized by the Economic Study Center. I am Chaudhry Nabila Tasneem on behalf of ESC. ESC is the pioneer student chapter of the Department of Economics, University of Dhaka, where our aim has been to build a platform through which we can bridge the gap between students and experts. Bangladesh Economic Summit is our flagship event where we hope to provide undergraduate students and economics enthusiasts an opportunity to explore the discipline outside of the regular curriculum. In the fourth edition of BES, through our theme, Economics of Change, Developing in a Dynamic World, we recognize the need for a more holistic approach to address the socio-economic problems of an ever-evolving world. Our event has several segments such as panel discussions, student presentations, a policy debate, and a public lecture. Today, on the sixth day of our summit, we are having our third and final panel discussion on the topic of reimagining rural urban spaces and sustainable cities. The discussion will focus on the developments in our rural urban spaces and the importance of designing sustainable cities and communities in Bangladesh. It is an honor for me to present our esteemed panelists to you. Firstly, Dr. Nawshad Ahmed is an economist, urban planner, and a former UN official with a PhD in economics and a master's degree in urban and regional planning. Currently, he is a team leader, TMP Consultancy Services under Municipal Government and Services Project at BES Consulting Services Limited. Previously, he was the Chief of Program Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation for UNICEF in Bangladesh for 8 years and in Nigeria and Sudan for 10 years. Before joining UNICEF, he worked at the Asia Foundation overseeing NGO programs, in the private sector as an economist, and in the government as an urban planner. Moving on, Ms. Farah Kabir is one of the leading researchers of our country who has been working in the development fields for more than 2 decades. Since June 2007, she has been working as the country director of ActionAid Bangladesh. Her career in the development field started with the Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies. She has worked with the British Council in Bangladesh and in the UK. She developed a curriculum for gender and women's politics from Asia Foundation in Nepal and APWLT. For her remarkable contribution to Bangladesh's women empowerment, Ms. Farah Kabir won the Nawab Ali Chaudhry National Award in 2012. Her development works and ideas focus on governance and women's issues, particularly women in politics. Next, we have Dr. Mohammad Saidur Rahman, who is a professor at the Department of Agricultural Economics, Faculty of Agricultural Economics and Rural Sociology, Bangladesh Agricultural University. He obtained his BSc in Agricultural Economics from Bangladesh Agricultural University and MSc from Norwegian University of Life Sciences, Norway. He also holds a PhD from Bangladesh Agricultural University. Dr. Mohammad Saidur Rahman was involved with 26 research projects and has a total number of 69 publications under his name. He has served as a part-time consultant in many national and international organizations, including IRI, IFPRI, World Fish Bangladesh, and ADB. He also holds lifetime membership at Krishibid Institute in Bangladesh and Bangladesh Economic Association. The chair for this session is Dr. Firdousi Naher, who is a professor of economics at the University of Dhaka. She obtained her PhD in economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University in 2000. She has also served as a postdoctoral fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute from 2011 to 2013. She began her career at the International Rice Research Institute, Dhaka, as a consultant. She worked as a senior economist at Brac and as an economist at IFPRI before starting her research career at Dhaka University in 2002. Unfortunately, one of our esteemed panelists, Dr. Adnan Zillur Morshed, will not be able to join us today due to some unavoidable circumstances. Now, I'm handing over the floor to Firdousi ma'am to conduct the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nabila. Good evening to all. And let me begin by congratulating the Economics Study Center for organizing the 4th Bangladesh Economics Summit 2022. Our students are at the helm of affairs for the ESC, and it is really very gratifying and also a matter of pride for us to see our students so successfully organize such pertinent discussions. So the topic of this evening's discussion is reimagining rural urban spaces and sustainable cities. We have a distinguished gathering of panelists, and Nabila has already given the introductions to our panelists. Let me thank them immensely for taking time off your busy schedules and giving us this evening. Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you and learning from you. So while we'll shortly hear our esteemed panelists, just a little message for those who are on the platform. If anybody wishes to ask any questions, then please type them out in the chat box and send them directly to me. And I will take them up once all our speakers have spoken. And in case you would want any particular speaker to answer a particular question, please indicate that as well. So coming back to the topic of this evening, which is on sustainable cities, Bangladesh has been facing an unprecedented level of urbanization. In fact, since the mid-1970s, the urban population in Bangladesh has grown at about 5% per year. And the demographic transition has been such that now increases in population has essentially become an urban phenomena. In fact, the last census that recorded an absolute increase in urban population, which was way, way higher than the absolute increase in the rural population. So this mammoth increase in the urban population has actually left our city authorities grappling as to how to tackle this. And from time to time, many stopgap measures have been taken, which have actually resulted in a development that is messy, that is unplanned. And these in turn have led to the emergence of a host of problems, which threatens to be unsustainable. The entire development that has taken place, that banner of unsustainability is looming large over our heads. And this is very much contrary to the Sustainable Development Goals SDG 11, which talks about sustainable cities. So this is precisely what our discussion this evening will revolve around. And with that little introduction, I'd like to now give the floor to Dr. Nawshad Ahmed. Please, sir, if you would now share your experiences and advice on this issue. The floor is now yours, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you, Dr. Firdousi Naher, for introducing us, as well as your brief introduction to the topic of the day. You have a set of discussion questions, but before that, let me just start by saying that urbanization is not always bad, and urbanization can actually bring a lot of improvements in the growth process of a country. It can be very important for the economic development, flourishing of business, fostering of innovative environment in the urban area, and it can actually bring a balanced development of a country if properly planned, because you cannot avoid urbanization in any country in the world. So we must actually recognize the fact that urbanization is a process that will come today or tomorrow in every country. And unless a country is developed, you cannot actually think that urbanization will not be accompanied with it. So urbanization will always be accompanied with development. But it can also happen that urbanization can also bring rural to urban migration at a larger scale, bringing agricultural production, effective agricultural production, urban poverty, a slum-like situation in the larger cities, and some environmental concerns with the poorest of the poor exposed to different kinds of hazards. And of course, as we see in the context of Bangladesh, a lot of urban problems, especially in Dhaka city, where more than 220 million people now reside. And we are facing a problem of transportation, air and water pollution, and on a daily basis, we are exposed to different hazards. And actually, in terms of the planning of urban spaces, especially Dhaka, Chittagong, and largest cities, where planned development has not taken place, there we see that we have a lot of other problems accrued from unplanned development of the urban areas. And some of the problems relate to centralized system in the country. Decentralization overall is not that big, and then also some of the urban areas are not decentralized. Most of the urban areas are not functioning in a decentralized way. If you see the municipal system where the urban decentralization process should have flourished by now, it has not flourished in that sense. So the urban and rural local government both are weak, and urban local government is facing a lot of challenges. Out of 329 Purasabhas in the country and 11 city corporations in the country, about 75% of them cannot actually pay the salaries of their staff. And most of them are still dependent in a large way on the government resources. If you think of the most advanced cities like Dhaka, Chittagong, Rajshahi, there the per capita local government resource generation is like 3,000 or 4,000 taka per year. Smaller urban areas generate even less, like 300 to 500 taka per year per capita. So with that small amount of money, while the GDP growth depends on the urban areas, and 75% of the GDP is actually coming from the urban areas, the resources generated in the urban areas by local government bodies is very small. And with that small resources, they cannot develop. So they continuously depend on the central government resources or donor funding to build their infrastructure and the services. Definitely what happens is the service level is poor, the infrastructure is not adequate, and that's why the people of the cities and urban areas are constantly facing the poor services, lack of hospitals and schools, poor environment, and so on. In largest cities, the coordination of the infrastructure development planning, as well as health and education system, is also very weak. So what I wanted to drive at is that the responsibility of cities planning, development, and services should have been on the local government bodies, but they are not capable of fully delivering the services according to the mandate. We know that Purasabha are run through the ordinance of the 2009 Purasabha Act, and different city corporations actually are run by their own respective laws. The responsibilities are similar, but they are unable to tackle the huge urbanization challenge that is coming. And in the next 50 years, the challenge will be even more formidable. As we know that urbanization rate was only 7% when the country was got liberated in 1971. By now, the percentage of population in the urban area has reached 38%. and 60 million people live in urban areas. So the urban growth is tremendous, and this growth will continue over the next decade. We will have 80 million population living in urban areas by 2030. And by 2071, we will be moving towards 80 to 90% of the population living in urban areas. Are we prepared for that? You know that Latin American countries have already reached between 80 to 90% population living in urban areas. And they are struggling with the problem of lack of services, shortage of infrastructure, health services, 20 to 25% of the national population living in slums, and crime, and all of those things. So urbanization not necessarily bring a higher level of living conditions. So it should be planned well, and there should be a development and physical space nexus to be built in order to tackle the urbanization challenges in the future. We cannot stop urbanization. No country could stop it. Even the socialist countries could not stop urbanization, the rural-urban migration, and the rate the urban population grows. So we have to recognize it and should plan ourselves in order to tackle this huge challenge. You know, the developed countries have urbanized in a tremendous way over the last 1.5 centuries. And Bangladesh will be no exception to that. South Asian countries will be no exception to that. There may be policies to try to have rural development type of projects and programs and policies, but that will not be able to actually tackle the huge challenge. You know that the agriculture's contribution to GDP has already come down to 12%, and that of industry has grown to 35%, and services to over 40%. So this trend will continue, and the role of agriculture will be reduced as we go along. So in that sense, the agricultural sector, while we have to give, of course, importance to agricultural sector, but in terms of resources invested by the government and private sector, we have to slowly move away from a rural development orientation and move to an urban orientation where the GDP growth rate is so high, and giving proper services and infrastructure to the urban population will improve the GDP growth rate further. As we know that poverty has gone down in the country over the last 50 years from 80% to 20% of the general population, and even less for the hardcore poor, which is 12%. So this trend will continue because it is one of the things that happens when a country develops, and when urbanization takes place, poverty level goes down. But inequality also increases. That is one of the things that we have to take note of. That in many countries, urbanization brings along with it inequality. And that is something that the country is taking note of, the government is taking note of. But there should be more policies to see that there is more geographical balance within the country, and of course, more equality in terms of income and possession of assets. So that is one of the policies that is important for us to take note, that we should not be focusing only on the capital or one or two other cities in the country, but should develop the small and medium-sized cities and towns also, in order to have more balance within the country. The Latin American countries are actually suffering from an imbalance in the physical term and in terms of also resources and income. So we have to learn from the Latin American countries how they have been now going through a period of struggle with faster urbanization and a problem of environmental degradation and a slum-like situation. So we learn from them, we plan well, and then we can expect to have a better living condition in the country. If I have more time, I can continue. Otherwise, I will stop here and allow other panelists to kindly also give their views on the subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nawshad Ahmed. I see that there are a lot of questions for you, so we will have to come back to you. So let's go on to the next speaker. And then after everybody has spoken, we'll take up the questions and have further discussion. So may I now invite Farah Kabir to please take the floor. Appa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I was wondering, why am I, because no, I'm a non-economist and neither am I an urban planner. So my perception or my contribution here will be based on what we are doing on the ground and with the communities we work with. I mean, as already stated by Dr. Nawshad Ahmed, that urbanization is inevitable. And it is very closely linked with the development paradigm. But did it have to be like this? And you have to get to the root cause of it. The root cause of it is the concentration of all services, the concentration of the administration, the bureaucracy, the military, schools, hospitals. So in 50 years of Bangladesh, we have seen that concentration has not been spread. The decentralization has not happened in that sense. And we know that there were efforts at different juncture in our history to decentralize, to try and bring in, move the services, the infrastructure to different parts of the country. And yet today when we speak, we look at Dhaka and we've got over 20 million population. And there are many parts of Europe where the whole country comprises of only 5 million or 6 million people. So if we were to think logically, it would mean that then for just the Dhaka city, we need to have 5 or 6 different administration or institutions and systems that can provide services to that level of population. I go to Dhanmandi, from Dhanmandi 1 to Dhanmandi 27, I think there's more than 10 lakh people, or if not more, probably more. So how do you, the city was not planned in a way to provide services to so many people. And therefore, and we see the gaps. And interestingly, I don't know of other countries in the world or other cities in the world, Dhaka city has umpteen numbers of master plan and over the last 50 years. And for some reason, none of them got implemented or not to the full extent of it. And therefore, we are seeing the unplanned urbanization, which as we all agree, urbanization is inevitable. It is good because, it drives the economy and it should be to that extent. But where the problem comes in or kicks in is when you look at the unplanned nature of it, the gaps in infrastructure, the gap in public services, the gaps in access to services, affordability. There's a whole range of issues. We had done a study of a slum area, and for the slum dweller, the rent that they had to pay for 9 feet by 10 feet space, if you converted that and you looked at the rest of the world, it would be square feet wise, the same as you would have to pay in New York or in Tokyo. Can you imagine? But this is a slum. Or they could use water. They had access to a water point, And for that one-time use, they had to pay 100 Dhaka per month. So imagine the water bill. And then for gas, collective gas use, they have to pay a very high price, and you don't know when your turn will come. So these are the issues, or this is how we are living in this city. And when we look around Rajshahi and Chittagong and Khulna, we probably find similar, maybe not as harsh as in Dhaka or as steep as in Dhaka, because the thrust is on people coming to Dhaka. And we have always had people migrating because of hazards, floods, cyclones, and now we know because of climate change and the vulnerability that has created. So the fragility of people, the vulnerability of people, and lack of resources have multiplied. I have worked in many parts of the city, and you may or may not know that there are many slum dwellers, there are many people living on the streets, and the woman has given birth on the street without any medical services. And she's been living in that slum for 20 years. I work in Pura Bosti in Mirpur or in Goran. And in these areas, of course, with all the advocacy and lobbying and years, we have tried to bring in some improvement. And the community has also started to get organized. But these are informal settlements, and there is no certainty. In Pura Bosti, they had electricity, and the slum dwellers would pay for the electricity. They were very particular. They did not miss. But because it's an informal settlement, it is a political arrangement. It depends on who the leader is at that point in time. At one point, their connections were all cut off. Now, the government was getting revenue, because they were paying for the electricity. So this was cut off. They were deprived of the services. What did they do? Then they found an alternative, which meant that the government's revenue was being deprived. They had to pay higher prices to get access to, and this today is not acceptable, because all citizens, this is a part of our constitution, this is the basis of this nationhood, that everyone should have access to that. So this is where we see the problem, and this problem probably in developing countries and LDCs is widespread. And perhaps that is why the UN felt the need to bring in or have a conference on the new urban agenda, in 2016, 2017, because the new urban agenda was about people, planet, prosperity, peace, partnership in urban spaces, and we know that UN members of the UN have signed up to it. This also brings to our attention that there all this separation in terms of global agenda. We see the new urban agenda coming post SDG. While SDG 11 was dedicated to cities and urban, or climate, SDG 13 or SDG 5 about gender responses, and yet they had to come with the new urban agenda. So this is from where we are sitting, and my piece of work has been about cities being safe for the marginalized, for women, girls, people with special needs. That has been our agenda of work. And we found huge gaps in that. Safe cities became so critical because of the nature of violence, the persistence of violence, the tolerance of informal power, and many other issues. So now I was given a few questions. I don't feel that I have that sort of expertise to talk about the agriculture sector. I don't know why I was given that questions, but generally we can see that the need for accommodation, the need for housing is going to compete with agriculture land. This is, I'm talking common sense. I'm not an economist. I'm not an urban planner. And therefore that challenge is already there. And this challenge manifests in food insecurity, loss of nutrition, affordability, and other issues. So this is very clear, and I think the government has tried to come up with suggestions in the 8th five-year plan or the previous 5-year plans, but we are still seeing the need to address this more seriously. And then we have had 2 years of COVID, the pandemic, and there's ad hoc arrangements where government tries to sell food or oil at certain prices, but it is not controlling the root causes. Inflation remains, climate change is happening, disruption, and therefore migration is happening. And as all this is happening, we see urban pollution increasing, loss of water. There are so many parts of Dhaka city where people struggle to get water even for an hour. Then we can talk about health. Now, all this, air pollution, quality of air pollution, lack of access to water, the food, and corruption in the whole food system, all this is impacting on health. So that is also a big issue. And health services, when you have 180 million people to deal with, and of which 22 million live in just Dhaka and its periphery, it is a huge challenge. And then we have problems around noise pollution, waste management. Waste pollution is a huge problem. And medical waste pollution, we don't have a clear policy. Electronic waste pollution, I think we're still struggling with that. And these will have implication on our health. Now, we have polluted the rivers around the city. The water source has been impacted so severely that we know, and it's amazing that we all have our stomach problem. Professor Abdullah Abu Said used to say that Bangalira তাদের এই পেটের পীড়ার কারণে lethargic এবং তাদের আরো অনেক কিছু দেওয়ার যে সুযোগটা ছিল সেটা নষ্ট হয়ে যাচ্ছে বারবার. And it's true, because when I went to work in Shatkhira or in other rural areas, the moment I was able to, with my colleagues, establish a water point, the villagers came and hugged me and said that the shelter or other support you have given is useful, but this is critical, because now we will have drinking water, safe drinking water, we will be safe, our children will not be suffering from diarrhea and other waterborne diseases. So thank you for that. That is how they were looking at it. Now, we talk about challenges. The favorite development paradigm is develop infrastructure, invest in infrastructure. Who's this infrastructure for? How this infrastructure is going to impact the people around it or within it is never on the top of the agenda. And I would say that one of the challenges is not creating spaces for participation, for designing, whether it is the infrastructure, whether it is the services, whether it's future planning. There is huge gaps in that area. And as there's no participation. So already Nawshad has said that decentralization remains a big issue. And decentralization now has reached a stage where it is critical. Because like if you go to any Poroshobha, if you go to any of the rural areas, the population size is anything from 3 lakhs onwards. So আমাদের গ্রামেও এখন, except for chor areas where you will get smaller population, everywhere the population is high, and therefore those services is needed. So I think decentralization, we have tried to talk about it. We have been campaigning, advocating for it, but there is a resistance from the center. So we'll have to have more arguments or rationale to show that it makes sense. I've just recently visited Bola, Chor Fashion, and so on. Now, we started working there in 1983. When I go back there now, there has been so much development there. The poverty is not what it used to be. People are not asking for handouts. People are asking for opportunities, how to do better, how to grow, and how to compete with others. So there is that need also for looking and defining poverty. And I think economists have to look at that. My personal view is that we are seeing such an increase in the inequalities. Social cohesion is going to be challenged to the degree infinity. And therefore, violence, crime, mental health issues, all this is on the rise. And we have to work together. Cohesion, public-private partnership, political commitment, and understanding that, whole of the society approach is needed, and no one is safe unless we are all safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Farah, for that insightful talk, for your vast experience that you have on the multifarious issues that we face in the urban areas. Again, there are several questions for you, so we'll come back. Our next speaker and the last speaker is Professor Dr. Mohammad Saidur Rahman. If you would please take the floor now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, session chair. Other panelists, Dr. Nawshad Ahmed and Farah Kabir. Both of you explain in details the whole issue, which is has given very importance here. Particularly, sustainable cities issue is important here. I have seen the summary that you have posted in the email and website. First of all, I like to appreciate the team. They actually summarized the whole issue and posted in the web page for the understanding of the participant and for the panelist as well. So I like to go to the summary presentation. If I share the screen, if you please allow me, some of the things I like to mention here, and based on that, I like to discuss the issue here today. Actually, a lot of things has been mentioned here very nicely, and I personally believe the city issue and their insight has been mentioned here very perfectly, and we can mention the population, what is expected in the cities, particularly in our country, Dhaka and Chittagong, and also they covered the tree covered area, what is expected and what is the expectation of green park per capita in the cities. But to be very frank, it is not up to the mark. We all know it, but the issue is here that the environment, climate change, traffic, health issue, that already mentioned two of our panelists. What would be the realistic solution? I think this is a $1 million question to all of us, right? So we must attempt to decentralize. Is it the only way to mitigate the scenario? Dr. Nawshad Ahmed mentioned one thing, that the GDP share of agriculture is declining day by day. It is true, and it is also expected. When a country will be in the developing stage, the contribution of agriculture will reduce, but it is very important that the volume of agricultural contribution is increasing day by day. So what is happening is the transport and other service sector, they are contributing more. This is also very expected. Hope our panelists will agree with me. If we see the some of the constraints of the cities, actually there are many. How we can address those things, I am very true that I don't have so much exposure on that issue, but since I am my field is agricultural economics, so I will be concentrate my point on the rural aspect, sustainability of rural development, and how can we protect our agricultural land, because last couple of weeks some discussion is happening, particularly after having some observation of our Honorable Prime Minister that the agricultural land should be protected somehow so that we can ensure our food for the people. So that is also important, but it is well said that the urbanization is obvious and it will be happen throughout the world, and Bangladesh will not be out of that that issue. But how can we accommodate both rural development as well as sustainable cities? It's a big issue nowadays, and we can see Dr. Nawshad Ahmed has a lot of expertise on that, and hope the participant will have question to his about this sustainable cities issue. And if there is anything related to agriculture, I will try my level best to answer those questions also. And how to raise how to reduce the environment pollution and also different sorts of hazard that Farah Kabir also mentioned here. That will be the challenge, no doubt. But we have to adopt definitely integrated approach, and so that we might have a better plan. Multiple level stakeholder is necessary to design cities, and maybe all stakeholders, they should come forward in this issue so that a integrated process we can manage there. I will emphasize another new issues, which is rural utopia means nothing but good place. Actually, emphasis is given to rural development, keeping cities issue constraint. How can we stop this migration from rural to urban areas so that cities growing necessity will not be so important? So that issue we need to think very carefully. Another thing is that Washington Census on Food, Agriculture and Rural Development, they mention changing rural areas with respect to demography, diversification, links to national global economies. There are things also we need to consider, and we need to have a lot of research on that so that we can somehow manage this rural development changing in the with the economic development of a country. Another thing is that rural development Ethiopia emerges because rural middle-aged and elderly and young people have changing their expectation and asking for new strategy. What will be that strategy? It's an issue we need to investigate. Another thing is rural scene are also changing, diversification with evolving land, labor market, rising aspiration of rural elderly people, and those who are living in the rural areas, their expectation is also increasing. So if we want to keep our rural people in the rural area, then cities area wants to be sustainable, then a government policy is needed, no doubt. If we see the development process of the, say, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and many other countries, they have a good plan for the cities. And I should say it is sustainable, because everything is under a set they are planning. But in our country, we don't have any strong set of rules and regulation. We have authority, but I'm not sure that authority have sufficient power to manage the city issue perfectly, because if we watch television every day, we can see our city mayors are struggling a lot to manage their city aspect every day. So other thing is that emphasis has given to the SDGs in the 8th five-year plan. More balanced approach is needed to inclusive rural development as well as sustainable cities. But after having these summits, I did not have so much voice in relation to these sustainable cities. Always we see it is expanding and we need to have some sort of policy or something like that. But I think this study center rightly mentioned the issue, and this will be the more discussion in near future. Rural urban, I think difference, we need to reduce that also, and we need to have some sort of policy. We need to, if we want to protect the cities, then we need to have reasonable migration, and that might have some sort of, based on some sort of policy, no doubt. So in the coming days, there might be some policy from the government, so that both issue will be addressed equally, whether we should protect the migration, whether we should protect the cities growth or rural development. There should be some sort of management policy. I think Farah Kabir also mentioned the waste management issue, and also sanitation. That will be the important issue, and also mentioned in the 8th five-year plan. Finally, saving arable land, environmental protection, that thing's also very important, and we need to think very carefully. So at the end, my suggestion is to have balanced development, which is necessary in respect of sustainable development as well as the rural development, particularly for agriculture-based country. So I think I should be stopped here. And if we have relevant question to me, particularly for agricultural land issue and the rural development issue, I can try to answer that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saidur Rahman. I think all our speakers have touched upon a wide range of issues. We've talked about economic density being very low, even though population density is so high. Talked about lack of capacity of the urban local bodies, the huge resource crunch that the local bodies face, that they have to depend on the center for regularly depend on the center for shortfalls. And then Farah Kabir, madam, you talked about the lack of decentralization. Even Dr. Nawshad Ahmed, of course, you also talked about the lack of decentralization, the gaps that are there in the services, the exorbitant rates in the slums, despite the fact that they barely get any service. And then Dr. Saidur Rahman, you talked about how to manage the development, the urbanization, so as to have a balance between the urban and the rural areas. So thank you so much for touching upon all those issues. There are quite a few questions. So what I did is I took photographs of the chat box. So some of them are overlapping. So I'll take a few questions. Dr. Nawshad Ahmed, ami apnake apnar question gulo ekটু পড়ি. So the first question that's there for you, yeah. It says, since slum and squatter developments are increasing day by day in the large cities of our country, how should the government design policies for sustainable housing in a manner that would provide a balance between the environment and urban growth? That's one question. And there's another question. It says, how practical is the idea of decentralization? And then there is another very interesting question, which says that the Bhashanchor project to rehabilitate the Rohingyas, that was done really fast. But when we talk about rehabilitating our locally displaced people, the slum people, that really moves at a snail's pace. So how do you look at that? So these are the three questions for you, Dr. Nawshad Ahmed.
Thank you very much. And thanks to the audience and those who actually posed these questions. These are very important questions, I think, and relevant for the urbanization scenario in Bangladesh. So let me take the first question, which is about policy making for the slum or squatter population. Yes, we know that it's a huge challenge. We don't have any recent data on slum in Bangladesh, official data, but the one that we have about a decade back shows that the slum population is about, I think, 6% of the total urban population. So it's not a huge problem to me. I think 6% is not the issue. We can build houses for them. We can have policy, poverty alleviation kind of policies for them and build houses, and then we relocate them in those houses. Some Indian cities have actually done that. Bombay, Delhi, they have built small apartments for the slum population and relocated them. But the challenge that we might face is that this may encourage more people to come to the cities, and then they demand the same housing, which is expensive to give actually. So what is the solution? My solution is actually to have an overall urban and regional policy that many countries have actually drawn up, and they follow the policy. They get allocation from the government for implementing the policy. So Bangladesh do not have an urbanization policy. We don't have any physical policy as such. We have policies for the cities where it says that they have to prepare master plan, and master planning is of course necessary. The structural plan, master plan, zoning, all of those things are necessary for proper development of urban areas. But when we see the policies for those master plans, it is basically zoning policy and have some kind of ambition for the city as a whole, but it does not tackle that much the issue of poor people. We have poor people of different types. We have rickshaw pullers. We have people who goes to work for these garment factories. There are disabled people. There are street children. There are women who work as domestic aides. There are so many types of them. Now, how do we prioritize? And then what the policy might say about how to tackle the problem. There are several ways to do it. We can prioritize on the basis of the need. Maybe the old age population may get priorities in resettlement through housing. There may be other ways like paying for the housing. If we can make housing sustainable, then there may be poor people who may not be the poorest in the urban areas, but can afford the repayment of installments of the cost of housing or partial cost of housing if government cover the part of it. Then there are other ways to relocate them in a cheaper location, like in the vicinity of the urban area, not in the core area where land value is very high and it is difficult to acquire land. So it is also possible through mass transit facilities that we can relocate them in areas like Joydepur, where the city is actually is not even built in a planned manner, and the city is very, very large. It is about, I think, 329 square kilometers. It is bigger than Dhaka North and South City Corporation area. So it's such a huge area, but if you go into the city, you will see that there are a huge amount of land that is there, is a water body or fallow land or agricultural land and so on. So there is possibilities to relocate people there, and then you can have them a healthy living over there and have good transportation network to get them to the working places or to health facilities or to educational facilities, wherever it is. However, we have no policies as such. We need policies first. I think the policies should be followed by what we do. So the policies is necessary, and I strongly advocate through this forum for a policy on the urban area. And it should not be only urban, but urban and regional, so that it can look at not only in a limited sense the urban area itself, but the adjoint areas, so that we can think when we plan physically to actually encompass those issues, why the people are coming from rural area to Naranganj, Gazipur, Manikganj, Shawar, and so on, Tongi, and to Dhaka, of course. And then the Dhaka gets the most people, the concentration is the highest. So we need to think about not only one city, but cities around, and then plan well so that there is a better living possibilities for the people. When in London, maybe 150 years ago, they built small cities around London to actually reduce the problem of the pressure of people coming to London city. We already have many cities around Dhaka, so we don't have to create new cities, but we just need to plan well, manage them well, govern them well, so that we can actually solve some of those problems that actually the Sustainable Development Goal 11 asks us to do. That includes sustainable development, reducing inequality, better living conditions, and so on and so forth. So we have to work towards those. If we really want that the Sustainable Development Goal reflect when we report at the end of 2030, that some of the things that once we have attempted to do or we have done it. Okay, so this is about the first question. I think decentralization, we agree. Everybody, I think the policymakers, the government, political parties, they all agree. And that's why we see elections taking place in union parishads, elections taking place in Jila parishads and Purasabhas and city corporations. So we go up to the election level. But what about actually decentralizing, giving them power, financial power, administrative power, and all those power? In those, we actually lack a lot. And I think that is where decentralization should go. And it is not only rural decentralization. We mostly talk about rural decentralization, but it should also be urban decentralization. Urbanization, we have more than 500 urban areas in the country, city corporation, 329 Purasabhas, and many Upazila level centers and marketplaces. These all should encompass a network of urban areas that should be connected well, physically and virtually, and in terms of market access and education, health, everything should be planned well, so that in a long-term scenario, we can see that the value for money pays off. If we're not careful at this time, we will face the same kind of problem that the Latin American countries are facing. A tremendous amount of centralization, and then services lacking in most of the places, and then many places are deserted. In fact, Bangladesh could have the situation where in rural areas, many schools will have to be closed, many health centers will have to be closed, many facilities will have to be closed, because people will be coming more and more in the urban area. So we have to be careful in investing where we really invest. Of course, agriculture is important, but then we have to calculate the investment that is required for agriculture, and then rural roads and rural type of development, and then think about proper balance between investing in urban area as well as rural areas. Because urban areas will ultimately house most of the people of the country. So if we do not start planning well from now, we will have to face the same challenge, urban degradation, environmental problems, filling of canals, filling of adjacent water bodies, and all of those things will happen. And we also raise the question of taking agricultural land for urban concentration, urban housing, and urbanization. But at the moment, we have 11,000 square kilometers of urban area in Bangladesh, which is actually 7% of the total land area of the country. So in that sense, it is still not that much that we have taken land from agricultural use. And within these urban areas, there are a lot of empty spaces, open spaces, which can be built in a planned manner. If you see, many Purasabhas have areas like 29 square kilometers, 30, 40, 50 square kilometers. And most of these, it is currently is like a rural area, a few houses, 40,000 population, 30,000 population. Very, very few people are still there, but the area is so big. So there is possibility of building in those areas and not to encroach upon agricultural land. So if planned well, we can still use our existing urban area land within the 11,000 square kilometers that we have. Even as I say, Naranganj, Gazipur, Maneganj, etc., the Purasabha area is still very unurbanized in that sense. So we have those possibilities as well. And lastly, I think is Vashanchor resettlement versus the resettlement of the poor people in urban area. Yes, you know, the one thing that when an issue continues for years and years and years, we forget about it. But when an issue suddenly comes up, like the 10 lakh people of Rohingya incoming to Chittagong Hill Tracts, the government takes good care of them. You know that a lot of donors, a lot of NGOs are working there. Government is so careful about it because they are not Bangladeshis. I think they are from a neighboring country. So we take good care of the people in a neighboring country than we do for our people. But I can tell you that the way government now collects revenue, the budget size of the country, all of these things actually is very, very, gives a very hopeful future for us. We can definitely tackle the problem of the poor and the disadvantaged people in the country. You know, social protection program now is a 100 crore, more than 1 lakh crore taka budget through 150 programs, different types of programs, for school stipend to old age pension, a maternal health program. All of these things are there. We have started to tackle those problems already. So we have to continue this in a larger scale. And most of these programs actually bypass the urban poor. It's mostly is rural centers program. But in urban areas, we have to also replicate those programs or extend the programs to cover the poor people's needs. So in that way, we will be able to tackle this problem only if the government wants it, people in the power, the elected parliament members, local government representatives, if they all want, I think we can have the right policies and we can tackle the policies the way we have tackled the problem of food problems in the country. We have tackled the primary education problem in the country and many more. We have actually achieved the MDG goals, many of the MDG goals. So we will be able to achieve many sustainable development goals as well. If we have the right policies, we have the resources now, more resources will be coming. Every year the budget is getting bigger and bigger. And if we can handle governance issues, I think we are going to be in the right direction and we'll be able to tackle our problems very successfully. I'm very hopeful, and I think let us be hopeful about the future in both urban area and rural area. So thanks for this question again, and thanks for the mention of my name by both the panelists. If more questions are coming up and we have time, I'll also be happy to respond to those as well. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dr. Nawshad. There is one more question for you, and I think it's a very relevant question. So if you could briefly answer that, and then I will go on to the other speakers. That question is, how do you see the role of real estate industry in the development of sustainable cities? If you could please briefly answer that, and then I'll move on to the others.
All right, I think this is also a relevant question, because we see that I think about 100 or so apartments are sold in Bangladesh, in Dhaka city alone, in a year. So we meet the housing needs of 100,000 families every year. So I think this is not insignificant in any way, but you know that these apartments are not accessible financially by many of the middle class population and lower population of the lower end in the economy. But I think it is possible if there is a way to make this apartment building affordable. If, like India, for example, Calcutta, they have a way to give the payments of an apartment in over a long period of time, maybe 20 years, 30 years. And in many countries of the world, in developed countries especially, they have a way to pay your housing cost over the lifetime. So these things should be actually done in Bangladesh also. The government should, in the urbanization policy, include the housing policy also as part of the urbanization policy, and then have this kind of things included in the policy. And then also, of course, there can be partnership from the government. You know that Rajuk has built some economy flats in Uttara. So these kind of initiatives by the government alongside the real estate builders will increase the housing stock and affordable housing stock for the middle class and of course the upper class. With that, I will also thank again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nawshad, for your insights. I'd like to come to Farah Kabir. Madam, there are about 3 questions for you. So the first one says, it's Nabila Tasneem asks, the SDG 11 is dedicated to making cities and human settlements safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. However, house rent in Dhaka city has continued to rise over the years. To keep housing in the city affordable, should the government have the power to control rent according to the standards of housing facilities? That's one question, a bit of an overlap with what Dr. Nawshad just said. The second question by Saima Akhtar Zafreen, she says, recently the Prime Minister has declared that Gram Hobe Shohor. How do you connect that with urbanization? And one last question, which is, what's your point of keeping the sexual workers in the urbanization process? The Daulatia brothel is the world's biggest brothel, and they are living under the most abject conditions. These are the 3 questions for you.
That's a tall order. I don't make policies, so if I had the opportunity to make policy and support, then I would obviously do a lot more for the sex workers. And you know, Daulatia is an over 100 years old arrangement, and it is by the society, by the community, by political actors. And while they take the services, they have never supported. And I don't know how many of you know, when we started working, we asked them, what is the first priority that you have? What would you want to change? And they said, our right to dignity and our right to burial. They will not even be buried. They would be thrown into the water. So that's a whole social stigmatization and the invisible population, and we have to do a lot more. So I can't respond to that question in the sense that we can all come together and campaign. and influence policy. Because in Tangail, while again that is 100 years old brothel, it was being challenged because the land, it's about the land, and some powerful quarters wanted to grab the land, and then suddenly the sex workers became unsocial, became a community challenge, family challenge, and so while they had been there for more than 100 years. So I don't want to get into our own double practices in this country, and we will not get much in for those special communities, because there's discrimination and our attitude is problematic. Then your second question about, now I've forgotten the questions. Okay, so rent. I mean, you know, it is all related to inflation, access. The number of people looking for accommodation is much higher than what is available. So there is a push-pull demand-supply issue here. And definitely the government should have a policy that, you know, in certain areas, the rent should not be higher than this, in certain areas, the rent. And we are always looking at the government, because they are the people's representative, and they have the power to provide strategic guidance. And, you know, we also did years of campaigning, and there's the house building HRBI. Nawshad, you would know better. Is it HRBI or HBRI? Anyway, we campaigned with them on the building code, because anybody and everybody could build wherever they wanted to. But after years of campaign, the government put down that, no, you have to leave 40% space for green. Then you have to do this. You can go up, but you can't expand on the ground. You have to make sure. So Bangladesh has also seen the changes over the years because of the advocacy lobbying, whether it's the academic, whether it is activists, whether it's development practitioners. We have influence, but we still have a long way to go in that area. And I agree with you that the government should have a strategy, a policy, and it should give the strategic direction in terms of, but you know, the private sector, the business community has a stronger lobby. And even in the midst of the pandemic, the world scenario is that 1% have accumulated wealth beyond our imagination. What was the first other question? Firdousi?
Gram hobe shohor. How do you see that in relation to the urbanization?
I don't think that's a difficult to visualize, because Graham's character, the rural settings in terms of more green, the water bodies, and pristine. None of our villages or our upazilas remain pristine now. It's been affected by development, and people's ask for things. So you can go to Bhola or Char Fashion, or you can go to Kuakata, or you can go to Dhaka. You will find that change has also happened. People are being exposed to the infrastructure development paradigm, and they want to come back and replicate that. They're not necessarily coming back and replicating quality of services. They're not necessarily coming back and saying that, you know, we will govern in this way because it worked in Timbuktu or it worked in X country. So we found that good practice, we want to bring it here. It's also individuals' aspiration of wealth accumulation. So the narrative has to change. And I think this is where we will all have to do a lot more work. And the narrative right now is wealth accumulation, because we are in the capitalist system. It is how much money you can make and how you can individual growth or your family's growth. It's not necessarily always about inclusive growth. And this is why the government, the state machinery, policies, budget have a greater role to play. Can I just add to say a little bit about two of the questions that were asked to Nawshad?
Sure, madam. Sure.
I mean, again, the real estate, that is such a booming business in this country because we all need accommodation. But when the real estate sector developed, there wasn't clear direction. There weren't clear policies. And we are now suffering because they have grabbed a lot of the agricultural land. And they've also grabbed water bodies. And this is why Dhaka city has seen growth, but it has seen a depletion of the surface water. And it causes major problems. So we'll have to come up with alternatives. We have only been talking about problems, but there are also ideas, solutions that are being discussed. We're talking about rainwater harvesting. We have got solar panels now. So in a 50-year journey, we have also tried to look at what can be the solutions, practical solutions. So this was one thing I wanted to say, that we need better monitoring of this sector, real estate sector. And they have also now looked at how affordable housing comes in. But it will still remain in the domain of the private sector because we are not a social welfare country. We are not a socialist country. So the private sector will do the business. Government can at least give some guidelines, like the house building guidelines and environmental guidelines. So we hope that they will continue to do that. And my second point was someone was talking about Bhashan Chor and how quickly it was done. I assure you, none of us want to be refugees, even if we are provided with the best of best accommodation, because refugee means and especially for the Rohingyas, they are stateless. They are victims of genocide. They are stateless. Yes, Bangladesh has been humanitarian, and Bangladesh has opened its borders because we remember our parents fought in the 71 war, and that's the psyche we have, that we were refugees, so we must support them. But let me assure you that they live, I worked there, they live in bamboo, it's a space which is covered with plastic and bamboo. And you're exposed to everything. Rain can come, flooding can happen, your water supply is not necessarily secured, you're given food up to a point. Yeah, so if you work with the communities who are poor, if you give them a choice, let me tell you that they won't want to be refugees, because people value their freedom, their citizenship, their right to choose, and dignity. So yes, it might sound like, okay, if we could find an accommodation, all our problems will be solved. If you go to Bhashan Chor, you are there. You are not able to come to the mainstream without. It's very, there are security issues, there are control issues, there are ways to do things. They're better off if you compare to refugees in other parts of the world. So Bangladesh is an example of humanitarian response, but I assure you, nobody wants to be a refugee.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Appa. You're very right that it's magnanimous of our government to allow such a mass influx of people
Of the people, Firdousi, because the first responders were the people.
That was a wrong choice of words. That's wrong. Yeah. And we believe in that ethos because our forefathers have sacrificed a lot for that country, for this country, and we believe in that. And this generosity comes out of that, actually. But yes, it's true that it's not nice. It's awful being a refugee, and one can only imagine what they must be going through. Thank you very much, Dr. Saidur Rahman. 2 questions for you. One is, in what ways are rural people's expectations changing? Do we have enough data on what they actually want or need, rather than just assuming that they need this and that? And the second question, it's an interesting question. Bangladesh might lease land from, sorry for that. Bangladesh might lease land from South Sudan for agricultural production. What opportunities and challenges will this bring for our country? These are the 2 questions for you. Dr. Saidur Rahman.
Thank you. I think most challenging question for me because nowadays income of the rural people as well as the urban people definitely increase, except the COVID issue if we consider. So before COVID issue, the income of the rural and urban people rate of growth was really better. And we have seen the movement of the rural and urban people, particularly if the case is tourism in Bangladesh. And even many people, they use to get their meal in the restaurant. So that was one of the significant changes of our people's economic aspect, I should say. But nowadays, after having this COVID, the issue is already changed. But the people who are living in the rural areas, they have a lot of expectation to have better facilities, particularly for health issue as well as the education they might have for their children. So I should say, due to this media coverage and these communications speed up, the rural people expectation changing over the years. I should not say we have a lot of data on that, but if you see many issues, you can see the significance of increasing the expectation of the rural people. I can see that issue there. Another thing you mentioned the whether Bangladesh can take lease land in the South Sudan. Before a couple of days, we have seen our agriculture minister visited that area, and there was a press conference, and he mentioned that there is a scope. But as an agricultural economist, it's very difficult to say people or government of Bangladesh will take lease land from South Sudan and implement there the agricultural production. And I don't know whether bring it to Bangladesh or sell it to South Sudan and other countries, it will be so much feasible. It will be difficult to manage all sorts of things. Rather, we should have policies to increase our production, homegrown production in Bangladesh. I can see some other question which is relevant to me from the chat box. Water logging issues, in south part of Bangladesh, it is happening in the Khulna. So how can we mitigate that? Definitely government should have some sort of policies. Otherwise, it will be a crisis there. And it should be come after this strategy of the government, definitely. And we have also seen some of the issues. Somebody asked chemical stored in the old Dhaka city, as well as tannery is not moving to Manikganj or somewhere entirely, right? So I should say government should have some sort of strict policy and implementation ways so that the strategy they are taking can be implemented. Otherwise, like already Farah Kabir and Nawshad Ahmed mentioned that the real estate issue. I like to mention one thing here. If you go Bosundara city, there are some rules. Everybody need to need to obey that rules. say 45% of the land must be open space or something like that, or green tree, you have to plant there. But government is not able to implement their urban policy very correctly, I can see. So in this issue, I should say government should be very strict on that, on rules and regulation. Otherwise, it is very difficult to manage sustainable cities as well as rural development. Somebody asked whether government can offer lower interest rate for managing the housing in the city, or I have seen the Nawshad Ahmed already mentioned the installment payment, where we have seen in the developed country. If you want to buy a good house, you can pay that payment for a long time basis. So it is easy for the people to manage it. As I think for managing the urban areas and housing issue, government can take that example in our country as well. So I think these are the issues. I will just mention one more thing. Honorable Prime Minister mentioned Gram Hobe Shohor. We have seen some project, particularly RDA is implementing some project in Bogura and other cities also. So hope it will work, but one of the problem is that if many people come together, there are many issues there to which need to be mitigated. A lot of disputes will happen there. So who will take care of that is also very important, I think. From my side, I think this is my response on your question or the audience question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saidur Rahman, for your insights. Some more questions have come, but we are nearing that 1.5 hours slot that was given. We began after around 7:45 probably, so we're almost 1.5 hours now. So, but then some of these questions have already been answered as you've spoken. So I think it's time to close. And before we do so, let me just give the floor to
Firdousi, before we close, like for instance, it would be interesting to know that these are students. What will be their commitment? You know, when we're talking about the problems of urbanization, it doesn't have to be discussed now, but what is their vision of my city and how they will address some of these problems when it comes to waste management, when it comes to plastic and recycling. Where is that commitment? So as Economic Study Group has hosted us, I was wondering if some of this could be a commitment from them. And also, you know, we talk about the city urbanization and problem of transportation. Why can't we encourage people now to do more walking? Why, you know, alternative transportation? We don't have transportation, and the bus lobby, the bus and truck lobby is so strong, it has been problematic. Even then, we have seen some initiative. We did campaigns for safe cities, and we got Dhaka Chaka and, you know, some, but that is like a drop in the ocean. So young people, they'll have to find solutions. They'll have to come up with alternatives. You know, walk. It's a health issue. It's an environment issue. Walk to your workplace, walk to your universities. Do we have to depend on, and then you might question me, I can't walk because it's not safe. If I'm a woman or a girl, it's not safe. If I'm a person with disability, where will I walk? There's no, so those are the areas where you should challenge us, or when you have that faculty and student debate, then how do we get there? I hope I'm not out of line, but I felt that, you know, I worked so much with young people that they have ideas, and I want to listen to them also. So thank you for the opportunity, because today I learned from Nawshad and Professor Saidur Rahman, but also young people, students, their ideas is important.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Chair Madam, can I respond one thing? Somebody asked, people are leaving Dhaka and whether this trend is increasing or not, আমরা এটা দেখতে পাচ্ছি যে এক ধরনের ইস্যু তৈরি হচ্ছে যে বিদেশের মতো কারো কারো বাসা দেখা যাচ্ছে ভালুকা, আমরা যদি ঢাকা থেকে এই দিকে ধরি, অনেকেই সেকেন্ড হোমের মতো করছে। আই উড সে এটা কিন্তু খুবই লিমিটেড। সুতরাং এর উপর বেস করে আমরা যদি বলি যে ঢাকা শহরের মানুষ সব রুরালের দিকে ধাবিত হচ্ছে, দিস ইজ নট দ্য ইস্যু। সাম পিপল দে হ্যাভ।
প্রফেসর রহমান, ওই কোভিড এর সময় যাদের ইনফর্মাল এমপ্লয়মেন্ট ছিল, যাদের এমপ্লয়মেন্ট হারিয়ে যায়, তারা ফিরে যায়। So there was a big wave, but I don't think it was a choice. It was a forced decision.
It was forced. কিন্তু আরেকটা আপনি অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই দেখবেন যে ঢাকার পেরিফেরিতে অনেকেই একটা সেকেন্ড হোমের মতো করে কোনো কেউ রিসোর্ট হিসেবে
বড় লোকরা, এটা তো বড় লোক।
আমি বলছি যে এইটাকে যদি আমরা মেইন স্ট্রিম বা এখনো কোনো ইস্যু, আমার কাছে এটি কিন্তু মনে হচ্ছে না। এই জন্য আমি বলছি যে কেউ একজন প্রশ্ন করেছেন যে অনেকেই ঢাকা ত্যাগ করছেন এবং আশেপাশে বাসা বাড়ি করছেন, এটা ফিউচারের পলিসি কি হবে? আমার মনে হয় না। আমরা বিশেষ করে আমি নরওয়ে বেশি দিন ছিলাম, সেখানে দেখেছি যে সেকেন্ড হোমের একটা কনসেপ্ট আছে, কিন্তু সেটা আমাদের দেশের মতো সেকেন্ড হোম কোনোভাবেই না। দে হ্যাভ লট অফ ল্যান্ডস দে ক্যান ইউজ, but we cannot like that, right?
Thank you. I think we've had
Firdousi, আমি একটু বলতে পারি just 1 minute? এবং নাবিলা, আপনাদেরকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ এই সেশন করবার জন্য। এবং আমার মনে হয় যে আমরা অনেক কিছু শিখেছি একে অপরের কাছ থেকে, এবং ইভেন প্রশ্নগুলিও খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট ছিল, যেগুলো আমাদেরকে চিন্তার সুযোগ দিয়েছে, এবং মেবি আমরা ওটা নিয়ে আরো চিন্তা করব সবাই। তো আমি যদি আপনি অ্যালাউ করেন, আমার একটা রিসেন্ট বই আমি একটু ইন্ট্রোডিউস করতে চাচ্ছি, দ্য চিলড্রেন অফ বাংলাদেশ। আমি লিখেছি, এটা বইমেলাতে আছে, পার্ল বুক হাউসে, আর রকমারিতে পাবেন যারা কিনতে চান। আমি আপনাদেরকে একটু ইন্ট্রোডিউস করে দিলাম বইটা।
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
আমাদের আসলে অনেক, we had a very fruitful discussion, এবং Farah আপা যেটা বললেন যে the young generation should think in terms of how to cope with this ganjang that we have, think about walking and not take the bus or things like that. This is a food for thought, and you should really delve deeper into it, that how can we cope with the changed circumstances. আমাদের আসলে শেষ করার সময় হয়ে এসেছে। তার আগে আমি একটু আমার নিজেকে ফ্লোরটা দিতে চাই for a few words. এটা হচ্ছে 2022, and 4 years from now we graduate to a middle income country. And this is indeed, it's a moment of pride for us, because we began with nothing, and now 50 years later we are becoming a middle income country. And the most of the development that has happened in Bangladesh has been Dhaka centric. So for those of us who are residents of Dhaka, the development is palpable. 10-15 বছর 20 বছর আগে ঢাকা যেরকম ছিল, আজকে we see a totally different Dhaka. But if we just set ourselves aside for a while and just think about somebody who's visiting Bangladesh, from a foreigner's perspective, she যখন আসে বাংলাদেশে, what kind of an impression does he or she visually form of our city? From the moment one lands, enters the airport, to getting a decent public transport, to commuting on the chaotic streets, যেখানে maybe he or she is looking at the traffic being controlled by this thin luminescent stick. When we have these poles for traffic lights, those are defunct. It all doesn't really instill a positive impression in the minds of the visitors. Dhaka has a multitude of problems, and so do many other cities. Almost all other cities, developing cities, have these problems. But the issue is the scale of these problems. For decades, different stakeholders have been raising warning bells about how Dhaka city will be doomed unless we take corrective action. And the more we wait, the more late it gets, the worse it gets. And soon, if this is the way things continue, then soon we will reach a point of no return. So it's become extremely important to address these problems that have emerged from this mindless development that has been taking place, and not just addressing them for the sake of addressing them, but addressing them in their entirety, in their completeness, and addressing them meaningfully. We have to think about building smart cities. Globally, global evidence shows that no country has been able to move into middle income country status without developing its cities. So we have to leverage Dhaka, we have to leverage our cities. So continuing business as usual is not going to be the answer. We cannot anymore go for piecemeal solutions or short-lived solutions. We have to tackle things comprehensively. For example, আমি যদি একটা উদাহরণ দিই, if I just put up a notice saying that this area এটা ভিক্ষুক মুক্ত এলাকা, that doesn't solve the problem. Because if it is ভিক্ষুক মুক্ত, these people will go to another location and start begging because ওদেরকে তো বাঁচতে হবে, or say if the authorities announce যেই বাড়িতে sewerage lines are connected to the rainwater drainage, ওদেরটা কেটে দেওয়া হবে, then what option do the homeowners have? তাদের alternative কি? In fact, যদি কেটে দেওয়া হয় ওদের sewage lines গুলো, তাহলে আমাদের রাস্তাঘাটগুলো they will get littered with sewage, which is an even greater public health hazard. So the point is, these are good decisions that are being taken by the authorities, but then how feasible are they? And we need to go step by step. We just cannot announce one day and start implementing without thinking about what are the implications or how sustainable it'll be. Now, I don't want to say that things are not being done. Recently, we've seen commendable initiatives about restoring River Bugiganga, about identifying all these illegal markets and acting therein. This tempo needs to be sustained and things need to be expedited and scaled up. So what do we need? We need a shared vision where all stakeholders come together so that, we can minimize any kind of conflict. Because if we don't have a shared vision, if we don't have coordination, then we have to bear the cost of uncoordinated actions or maybe even conflicting actions. So that's something very important to take note of. Now, the problems in our cities are deep-rooted problems and they cannot be tackled simultaneously, So আমার মনে হয় যে আমাদের motto should be prevention is better than cure. কেন? Because curing is expensive, but prevention is easy. So we should actually pick up the relatively easier things first and then work our way towards the harder problems. একটা যদি আমি ছোট example দেই, এই garbage collection. আমরা বাসা বাড়িতে কি করি? আমরা সবজি ময়লা, যেটা রিসাইক্লেবল, যেটা নন রিসাইক্লেবল, সবকিছু একটা ডাস্টবিনে ফেলে দিই। এন্ড দেন সকালবেলা যখন এসে ময়লাটা নিয়ে যায়, তখন ও সবার ময়লা একসাথে করে ওই একটা বড় কার্টের মধ্যে একটা একটা করে হি ইজ সর্টিং ইট আউট। কিন্তু এই মডেল একটা কিন্তু মডেল, দ্য মডেল ইজ যে you separate it at the source. You keep your recyclable stuff alada, you keep your organic stuff alada, you keep your non-recyclable stuff alada. এটা যদি সোর্সে আমরা বাসাতেই যদি করে ফেলি, the whole thing becomes so much easier. And this is something which is very, very possible to implement. This is an easy problem. So এই ছোট ছোট easy problems গুলো যদি ট্যাকেল করে ফেলি, and then we ensure যে নতুন যা প্রজেক্ট আসছে ওগুলা যদি লেজিসলেশনের মধ্যে হয়, ওগুলা যদি anomalous না হয়, then we tackle that and then we go back to correct all the problems that we have. I think this can be a way, so that that motto, as I said, prevention is better than cure. And একটা last point আমি যেটা বলতে চাচ্ছি on finances. আমরা এমন একটা জাংচারে পৌঁছে গেছি এখন যে fixing the city has become exorbitant. But এটা এখন বলা যাবে না যে it's very expensive. This we cannot evade the cost. এই expenditure-টা আমাদেরকে undertake করতেই হবে. We cannot calm ourselves by saying that there's not enough money. So finances যেটা আমরা আসছে, we have to enhance these finances. There are so many untapped sources, যেরকম mobile tower, বা আমাদের যে কেবল অপারেটর্স বা কনজেশন চার্জেস, এগুলো কিন্তু অনেক খাত আছে যেখান থেকে আমরা রেভিনিউ কিন্তু তুলতে পারি। সো ইটস ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট টু রেজ অ্যান্ড এনহ্যান্স দিস ফাইন্যান্সেস। আবার আমাদের যে প্রপার্টি ট্যাক্স আছে, we are in a digital world, so we should use GIS mapping, track where is the property, তারপরে ওইটা যদি রেকর্ডস এর সাথে ম্যাচ করে তখন আমাদের আরো সুবিধা হয় to do the tax assessment and tax recovery. So overall আমাদের আসলে একটা transformative change দরকার। We need champions who will depart from the traditional way of doing things and take radical actions. এবং আমরা করতে পারি, there is example। কয়েক বছর আগে কিন্তু তেজগাঁও ট্রাক স্ট্যান্ডটাকে সরিয়ে দেওয়া হয়েছিল and একটা ভাইটাল লিংক রোড কিন্তু এস্টাবলিশ করে দেওয়া হয়েছিল so that easy traffic movement would be possible. তারপরে আমাদের হাতির ঝিল প্রজেক্ট আছে, that's a stellar example. So there, these things have been done by us and we can do it. We need the determination, the willpower and the tenacity to be able to do that. So with these words, I think we should now come to a close with the hope that আমাদের যে আজকের এই ডিসকাশনটা হলো that will bear fruit, এবং we will continue to see positive changes as towards making our cities sustainable. Thank you so much, esteemed speakers, for your time and for joining us here today. Thank you very much to ESC once again.
Thank you for inviting me. So, and সবাইকে খোদা হাফেজ, যেখানে থাকেন ভালো থাকবেন, and we'll all work together. That's the only way out of this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
to all.
you.
Khódá হাফেজ.
We have, thank you, ma'am. With this, we've come to the end of our third panel discussion on reimagining rural urban spaces and sustainable cities. I would like to thank our esteemed panelists and our honorable chairperson for such an engaging and enriching discussion. And on behalf of ESC, I would like to thank Farah ma'am for raising the topic of the commitment of, from ESC, we would definitely hold discussions on such topics. We would really love to do that. And tomorrow at 7:30 p.m., we will be having a really exciting policy debate between teachers and students of Dhaka University on the motion এই সংসদ অতি বৃহৎ বাণিজ্যিক প্রতিষ্ঠানকে জাতীয়করণ করতে। The session will be moderated by Professor M.M. Akash. The faculty members speaking for the motion will be Dr. Kabiri Gayan, Dr. Mohammad Tanzimuddin Khan, and Dr. A.K.M. Ghulam Hussain. The students speaking against this motion will be Sheikh Rafi Ahmed, Muqtasid Muhammad Rafiul Islam, and Lubaba Mahjabin Prima. Please keep your eyes on our Facebook page for the upcoming sessions and our YouTube channel for the previously held sessions. Thank you. And with this, I end my good night.